All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's virtual plant clinic. My name is Bill Lester. I'm with University of Florida Extension Service here in Hernando County. And joining me today is one of our Master Gardener volunteers, Bernie, who has been my regular co-host for a while. So good morning, Bernie. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for asking, Bill.
And this week we have back again our new Florida Friendly Landscape Coordinator. I think technically that is your title.
Sure.
Colby Pitts, who is brand new to the county and has taken over Lily Browning's position. Although nobody can be the new Lily, Colby has taken the reins and will be taking care of Florida Friendly Landscaping.
I'm excited to get started. It's my second week. I feel like we had some productive discussion last week, so we can keep that going.
Well, see, I have to be careful how I phrase all that because Lily may be watching, and then she'll start putting down comments. And
I don't want to be the new Lily. Trust me.
No. We need to what do they call it when somebody retires? Bernie, what do they call a professor who's retired years ago?
Emeritus.
Emeritus, yes. Lily,
go.
we're going to have to give her emeritus position, I think. Well, I'll have to take a little picture and try to put it in one of the boxes and see if I can't make that work. So that we're always thinking about her. Well, I can tell you one thing Lily didn't have to worry about this past week up in Pennsylvania was the storm that came through. So
did we have a storm? Boy, did we.
Yes, we did. And I hope everybody tuning in and watching us live or recorded made out just fine. I hope everybody's well and okay and didn't suffer an awful lot of damage. If anybody did, go ahead and feel free to share. Or if anybody has any questions about what may happen to their landscaping and their trees and their grass and everything else, if they found their yard underwater, because I know a lot of people flooded who normally don't flood. It was not a common, experience for them. And a lot of people flooded with salt water, which is a whole lot worse than fresh water.
Yeah, that's fairly damaging. The place I was working a few years ago when one of these storms went through, they had a couple of trees in front of the entrance that they really liked, and both the trees blew over. So we go in the morning, and the trees are at a 45-degree angle, and so they go get a tractor and they try and push the trees straight up, and of course the roots won't go back down into the ground. So as they're pushing, what they're doing is pulling the roots out on the side that's still attached. And finally, they realize that they're not going to get it straight, so they leave the thing at about a 10-degree angle and put some supports underneath it so it won't fall down. And it's all propped up with 4x4s. And I told them, I said, this is one of those things you really should get rid of the trees. It's never going to be successful putting them back up. And to this day, they've still got them sitting there with supports. And when you pull up in the parking lot, you don't want to park there because you know that one of these days those trees are going to fall over. They are not well supported. So the moral of the story is if you have a tree that blows partially over, you should remove it. Either that or if it's something where you really feel that you need to make an effort to save it, it's very valuable. Get an arborist, get a professional, but don't just try and push it back up and prop it up. That's not going to be long-term successful. And you don't want the trees falling on somebody later on, which, you're going to have a hard time in court explaining how this tree fell and you didn't know that it could do that.
Well, and a lot of times, with when you get that root damage when they're pulled out, there's a lot of very small little micro hairs on those roots that get damaged when they're pulled out of the ground, or like Bernie said, you're pushing it back the other way. That root damage is not going to be good for the health of the plant over the rest of its life. something to remember.
And that root damage shows up about 3 years down the road. So I can't tell you how many people call or email me, and I'm sure Bernie gets them also. I have a tree in my yard, and it looked absolutely perfect until today. In the middle of the night, something attacked it, an insect or something, and I have to spray. What happened? And then from talking with them and finding out what's happened on their property over the years, we figured out they had a flood 3 years earlier, or they had to dig up and replace water pipes or sewer pipes, or maybe new home construction, because now a lot of times in new neighborhoods, they clear everything except for a couple of large old trees. Then they drive the bulldozers and everything around and crush the roots, and they build the house. They throw down the sod. You buy it, you move in, everything's beautiful. I got a beautiful tree. 3 years down the road, the leaves or the needles are all falling off of it. And you think, what happened to it? It looked perfect until just 2 days ago. It's from what they did a couple years earlier to set the stage, because trees operate on a really slow calendar, long time schedule.
When I first moved to Florida, we looked at a house that the fellow had dug a fish pond in the backyard. And it was beautiful. He'd go out and he'd throw some little seed or little feed things out, and the fish would come up and gobble them up. I said, what did you do with all the dirt? And he said, oh, it's all spread out around here. Basically, he raised the level of all these oak trees a little over a foot.
Oh.
Took about 5 years. Every one of those oak trees died. So,
and then they come back blaming it on a disease that isn't even present in Florida, or they Google it and they find a problem with oak trees in California, and they figure, well, that must be what happened here. Nope. A lot of times it's you did it.
yeah, or they plant them at the wrong height. Citrus trees very, very sensitive to that. It you plant it 2 inches deep, and a lot of times the roots will climb back up that 2 inches, and then when they make the turn, instead of going straight away from the tree, they start circling the tree, and it 4 or 5 years later, the tree dies because it's girdled and can't possibly get any more nutrition. And nobody ever remembers that we didn't plant it well and it died. That was going to be the natural consequences. It's like anything else. You treat your child wrong, your child grows up and you end up with a really messed up child. Well, you treat your plant wrong, your plant dies. So, some people have all the luck.
Well, that makes it really easy on me, because if I ever have to look at pictures of a tree or have to go out and look at it, I look down at the trunk first. And if it was obviously buried way too deeply, that's the answer. Mm-hmm. Simple, solved, see ya, we're done.
And that's unbelievably common. I'm amazed. And there are commercial people that are out planting trees way too deep. Tomato plants are fine. If you want to plant a tomato plant another 6 inches in the ground, it's going to form some new roots and everything's going to be fine. But your tree wants to be at the same height that it grew from. So, if you dig one up and move it, make sure that you put it in the ground at exactly the same height that you dug it. If it's in a pot, put it in the ground. It's the same thing as the pot. So.
Same with palm trees. Very important. If you plant them too deep, they will die. So, Bernie, can we grow ginkgo trees in Central Florida?
No. Well, we can. That's not true. As a general rule, it won't be satisfactory. Although you have like a 1 in 25 chance that it'll survive, for the most part, it won't be satisfactory. And I always hate that kind of a question because there's a lot of those plants that really shouldn't be planted here. They're tropical. They want to be in South Florida. And you tell the people they shouldn't grow, and most of the time they won't. But some idiot who has no comprehension at all of what's going on, living 6 blocks away, will be successful. He'll have the microclimate where the plant will grow. He'll get the one plant that came out this year that will survive in a few degrees cooler area. And it really makes you look like an idiot. The guy said, well, I know they grow. My neighbor's got one. Well, all I can tell you is don't spend a lot of money on the one you're going to try it on. If you're going to spend $25 for a tree and you don't mind blowing $25 if it's not successful, great. But if you're going to spend $300 and have somebody bring in one of those trees, the odds are definitely against you. It's really sad, but that happens so often. And there's so many of those beautiful things that just don't work here. Lime trees are, and avocado trees, if you plant them yourself, they're going to die because they're going to die. If you plant them and you don't know they're going to die, apparently they'll survive. So the important thing is don't ask.
But then again, you might be the one in the county who's successful with it. So it's possible, but not probable.
Yeah.
So we got another question here. Bill has a small caliper Duranta Golden Dewdrop Skyflower, and it fell over from the hurricane. Any harm in seeing how it does?
There's never a problem with trying. But what you have to realize is if there's no damage and there's no real expense, by all means try it. If it's you stand it up, everything looks like it might work, and it's still there 10 years from now, that's great. And if you stand it up and next year it's totally gone, or next week, whatever, you haven't lost anything. The question is, should I spend $500 to have a professional come out and take care of this? The answer is probably not. But should I try it and see? If you're a gardener, if you're an experimenter, which, master experimenter, master gardener is exactly the same term, then I'd say go for it.
Yeah, it's only 1/2 inch trunk or stem. So you can stand it back up. You may want to stake it up temporarily to keep it in place until the roots grasp the ground to hold it up. But yeah, a lot of those things can be set back up. Just if you have a decent sized oak tree, pine tree, magnolia tree, something like that, and it's, half of its roots are sticking out of the ground.
Yeah, I'd say in this situation, they're probably 50-50 shot. It's worth a try. You've got it. It isn't going to cost you anything to find out.
It's one of those things where you need to kind of think, as when you're talking about like a large tree, you want to think about, well, there's a high probability this isn't going to work, so I'm not going to park my car under it or build my kid's playset under it. Just kind of be wary, because it's when you get that root damage, it's really, really hard for a plant to not only recover but then stay healthy after.
Now, if you're driving out in the country, I remember driving out 50 beyond Webster, somewhere between where you turn off to go to Webster and Groveland, out in rural southern Sumter County. There are fields out there, and there was a huge live oak. It looked like years earlier it had blown over, and there are roots sticking up out of the ground. This thing was massive in the middle of a field. It had fallen over, and some of the branches had rooted, and now it's growing. It's still huge and still growing, still alive. So out in nature, those things can happen. Probably not the kind of thing that you want to have going on in your front of your Spring Hill house, in your landscape. If it's out in the middle of a big pasture, I mean, nature has a way of taking care of its own, and plants are pretty amazing at how they can survive. Things are a little bit different in more of a urban setting.
If I remember correctly, I think the tree you're talking about is off of the Mazak mine, the Lime Rock mine, and
I think so.
I want to say that they put, so it was up and, they have roots coming out. I think they just loaded dirt, took soil, because, it's a mine. They got lots of dirt, and they just kind of packed it under the tree. And I was surprised when I saw it, because I went to UCF. I'm driving to Orlando from there, and I was like, man, they're putting dirt under that tree. And sure enough, now there's a big like half hill, and it's coming out all janky. But that tree's been there for quite a while.
Bill, how about talking about the problems from the saltwater damage for the people that are coastal? Because there's going to be a lot of saltwater inundation. What's that going to do to their lawns and to their landscape?
It is going, well, first of all, it depends on, I mean, this applies to people who live along the coast. I know there was a lot of flooding here in Hernando County, just north of us in Citrus County, awful lot of flooding up there. If you're used to flooding during events, weather events, and you get, saltwater intrusion into your yard, you live right on the beach and the water's been in your yard before, chances are you don't have everything you have growing in your yard is pretty salt tolerant. Otherwise it would have died a long time ago. But if you're not used to this, if you live further in and all of a sudden you got inundated with salt water, that has a lot of impacts on what is growing in your yard and what you can grow in your yard. There are a lot of plants that are very, very saltwater tolerant. Some things off the top of my head, railroad vine grows right on the dunes at the beach. I mean, it gets salt water over it all the time. But an awful lot of what you might have in your normal landscape is probably not saltwater tolerant. So unfortunately, it will most likely die. I know, and almost nobody has this, but there's a turf grass called seashore paspalum, and it's very saltwater tolerant. People will take buckets of salt water and dump it on it to kill the weeds, because salt water is going to kill weeds in your lawn, most of them. But if you have this type of grass, it doesn't mind salt water at all. St. Augustine, Bernie, how saltwater tolerant is that? I know it somewhat. It takes saltwater spray.
It's, I would say, term would be moderate. You can definitely plant it near coastal, so it's not real touchy, but it won't take continuous salt.
Yeah, so if you had high tide roll in and cover your lawn under a foot or more of water for a number of hours, your lawn may die. You're just going to have to be patient and wait a little bit to see how it reacts. A lot of different various landscape plants that landscapers will put in are not going to survive. The salt will kill them. And then the salt in the soil has a longer term impact. So you're not going to be able to just go to the store and buy new azaleas or hibiscus or whatever you might have growing and replace it. The salt stays in the soil for at least a certain period of time. So that has a profound impact on what survives in your yard and what doesn't. And I was watching reports from Crystal River, and people's houses either had a couple of 1, 2, 3 feet of water inside of them. Some people had 4 or 5 feet. Some people where their house was on a little bit of a hill, the whole yard was underwater, but the house was still up on top of the little bit of a rise. So if your entire property got soaked with salt water, best thing you could do is with most of your plants, wait for the water to drain, be patient, keep a really close eye on things. Trees, flooding and salt water kills a lot of different trees. So pine trees, oak trees, if they sit in standing water for 1, 2, 3 days, they will die in 1 to 3 years. They won't die immediately, not tomorrow, next week, or the week after that. But it does damage the root. And then very slowly over time, the roots die back. They're not able to take up enough water to support that tree, especially during the summer. So your tree may start to lose leaves and look dead at the very top. and it works its way down. That's kind of common. That shows root damage. Or the whole tree gets to the point where one day it's like, I give up. My roots at this point are shot because of salt water or sitting in standing water for days, and I just give up. And all the leaves fall off and the tree is done for. So be observant with these plants, especially trees, because they're large, potentially dangerous. Your hibiscus, if it falls over, it's probably not going to damage anybody or anything. Lawns, sorry, you're just going to have to wait and see how your lawn reacts and if it survives or not. Most lawns will not tolerate flooding. So if they sit underwater for a couple of days, they're going to die. They're going to have to be replaced.
Yeah, we've got a lot of people in our county that haven't had water on their lawn since '93, salt water on their lawns. And, that's a long time. A lot of people have moved in that are not familiar with what happens at all. And everything is pretty much new since '93. And it looks like it's been there forever. Well, it's going to look like forever again in another 30, 40 years. But it is going to be a problem. And is there anything that you can do to prevent problems from this? Or is it just it's going to happen and that's it?
There's really nothing practical that you could do. It's going to happen and that's it.
You got to remember too that if your entire lawn dies, you can't rush out. Like you said, that's all it's going to stay in the soil for a little while. So if your lawn's dead, don't rush out and buy a yard's worth of sod to put down, because that sod's not going to do very well if you're putting it in soil that's inundated with salt. And then in the sod, obviously, is not going to be salt tolerant. So,
yeah. I'm going to have to contact some of the turf experts at UF to get some guidance on that, because my guess is that, probably not right away, but pretty soon we're going to be getting a lot of calls and emails about what do I do about my lawn, because basically all of Hernando Beach got flooding to one extent or another. And you really need to investigate this before you just pick up the phone and call a sod service to come out and resod your yard, because they'll do it. If you tell them that you're going to pay them, they'll put you on the list and they'll come out and they'll put down St. Augustine sod, Bahia sod, whatever you ask for. But the problem is they don't do the groundwork and figure out if what they're doing is going to work long term. Give you a perfect example. Gentleman from Hernando Beach called, and this was a year or two ago. He said, I have a Bahia lawn and it looks terrible. It's about half dead. He said, I live in Hernando Beach, and he had gotten a soil test done and he was calling to get the results of it. But the reason why he had gotten it done is because his Bahia lawn looked terrible. And he said, I had a service, resod it 6 months ago. Before that, I had St. Augustine and it died. It looked awful. And I didn't want to mess with St. Augustine again. So I went with Bahia. So, Bernie, what pH soil does Bahia grass like to grow best in?
About 5.5.
Okay, his was 8.5.
Yeah, that's not going to work. That's what we call calcareous.
Yes,
Basically, planting it
seashells.
in limestone. That's pretty sad.
Yeah, so that fact was news to him, and apparently the service that he paid $3,000 to sod didn't know, didn't care, didn't check, didn't mention to him. They brought the Bahia out and threw it down, but that was kind of all they did. So you need to do a little bit of homework and get some information about, will this work? Do I need to do anything first? Can I do anything? If it won't work, what should I do? And we help you work through all those different questions, but don't just assume that your sod service, your lawn guy, the spray service, your brother-in-law, your neighbor is going to help you with all that background. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, that's the place for a freedom lawn, and let whatever grows grow, and you mow whatever is there. And when you run by at 30 mile an hour and you look at it, hey, that looks pretty good. So
Mine looks good. I cut it high. It's during the summer, it's probably 3/4 Bahia, the rest weeds, and it covers the ground well. And those are my goals, and I meet them. So my turf grass life is good, and I don't get yelled at.
you know, the probably the least expensive good lawn is Bahia, because during the summer, most places Bahia does look good. And then in the fall, you overseed with rye, and you pick up another 4 or 5 months of good looking rye. And that way, you only got maybe 2 months out of the year where you don't have a good looking lawn, and the cost is negligible. Especially if you're in an area where they have restricted water like we have now.
Okay, we got a bunch of questions and comments all rolling in here. Alicia's asking about planting season for vegetable gardens. You know, I have a couple classes coming up really soon on that. We have a class, and they're free. They're on Zoom, but they're free. We have one coming up for your cool season garden, and I'm going to mention all the warm season things that you could put in. Oh my God, is tomorrow September 1st?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna warm season gardens you could put in here in Central Florida September 1st. Then I'm going to talk about all the cool season things coming up. Let me go ahead and if you want to get information on that, if you just go to this website, I'll scroll it for a while. That has a listing of all the classes coming up. And then I have a couple of other cool season vegetable garden type classes coming up over the next month or so. And Alicia also, here's one for Bernie, has a tropical peach tree yellowing some. Is it due to the heat?
Very possible. Depends on how old the tree is and exactly where you are in the state. But in our
I think she's
area,
in Orange County, so Orlando area.
oh, okay, so it's just about the same. That's sinensis and the heat. The tree is done its thing, and it's ready to shut down and give up. The tree's going to have a very short life at these high temperatures. You know, you get 25 years out of a peach tree in Georgia, and you get 8 years out of a peach tree in Florida. So, depending on how old the tree is, it will get to the point where the bark will actually be peeling off the tree. It'll look that old. It'll be like burning. It's reaching the end. So don't worry about it, at least this year. And as long as it keeps producing, just be happy. Peaches, like I say, are very short-lived. I think the best one I had was 11 years. 2 years and never had peaches. It should start next year. It's very common. 2 to 3 years on nursery produced trees, because the rootstock is older than the top of the tree. It gives it a little head start. Otherwise, if you start one from seed, you're looking at maybe 4 or 5 years before you actually start getting peaches. When it does start producing peaches, get rid of about half the peaches on the tree, and the peaches that are there will be a lot bigger, like maybe twice the size. It'll produce way too many peaches.
Yeah, University of Florida has a lot of information online about growing peaches, diseases, insect pests, fertilizer, how to prune them, everything you need to know. Diagrams of how to prune them, because you have to prune them peaches a certain way for them to do well.
Pruning is very, very critical on peach tree. And if it's a 2-year-old tree, you need to prune it now. That's very important, that it's very early age that you prune it, because if you let it go, by the time it's 3 or 4 years old, it's too late to get the shape in the tree that the tree needs. So look that up. University of Florida pruning peach trees. There's tremendously great information available online.
And Cindy's live with us from Pinellas County. Still raining. Yeah, you guys got a lot of rain there. Hopefully, Cindy, you didn't live right on the beach. Hopefully. We have a question from the Facebook group. Is this a good opportunity to switch from a grass lawn and find alternatives for a native flora, require less water, less cutting, provide pollinators, some resources? What are some options that would work, at least on sections of lawn that are not getting traffic? There's a lot of ideas out there. To replace your lawn with something other than a lawn, first of all, if you're in any kind of subdivision with the homeowners association, probably not going to work. You need to talk to them first. This is not one of those things that you want to do now and ask for forgiveness later. So don't do like Bill. Be smart and get permission and talk to them first. But even if you're not in an HOA, if you live within Hernando County, you're going to have to check with or get information about county ordinances, code enforcement, things like that. You don't want to run on the wrong side of them. I had a neighbor right across the street, and I should still have some old pictures somewhere. What they did was, it looked like 10, 20 years ago, they just quit cutting the grass or anything. They did nothing. Front yard filled in with trees. They had chinaberry. They had golden rain tree. They had invasive trees. And they had a house and a forest. And you could see the house, and it looked really creepy. It was always really dark and everything. That's not Florida-friendly landscaping. That's abandoning your property. And cities and municipalities, code enforcement, HOAs don't like that. You will get in trouble for that, or they will want to have a talk with you. If you want to find some information on that, best place you can look is on YouTube. Go onto YouTube, the little search bar up top, look up Hernando County Government. Go to the Hernando County Government's YouTube channel, and then under the playlists, there's one for Florida-friendly landscaping. Lily Browning has a ton of recorded classes on there with all kinds of ideas about what to replace a lawn with, whether it's completely replacing it, doing a section, doing bigger flower beds. The less grass you have, the easier it is to take care of the grass, because the less grass you have. So maintaining a huge lawn is becoming very expensive. You're having to spend a lot of water, chemicals, money, time, everything. Think about just shrinking back on the grass and expanding on something else that's easier to care for, and that's going to really, really help.
In the near future, actually, we're going to have some more live lectures, and which will eventually be posted onto that YouTube page, as well as some stuff I'm going to do, covering a lot of the things that you asked right there. So that's Hernando County FFL on Facebook and Twitter, I believe, as well, or X, if you will.
One of the things people tend to forget is just because it's a Florida native doesn't make it Florida friendly in your application. And although Florida friendly plants and native plants really work wonders, a native plant generally tends to grow here, and it's very happy, and it's climatized, it's all set, it's great. But the problem is, it isn't necessarily the right plant for where you want to put it. So when you start looking at plants, one, make sure that the plant accomplishes what you're trying to accomplish. Don't go out and just because it's a native plant, it may not work well where you want to put it. If it's something that needs to be in the shade and you want to put it full sun, it's like any other plant that wants to be in the shade. When you put it in full sun, it's not going to do well. Second, some of the native plants tend to be pioneering. We don't we don't use the nasty words, but they do tend to take over an area. So understand what this native plant is before you plant it, and don't rule out some non-native just because it is non-native. What you're going for is an overall effect that is appropriate for your yard, and that's more than just going out and buying a bunch of plants that say native or whatever and sticking them in the ground. There's a science to this, and it's a difficult thing, and it requires a little education. So if you see something you like, my recommendation is never buy a plant on the spur of the moment unless you're buying one for the heck of it. Always go home, look it up, find out about that plant, and then if it's appropriate, buy the quantity that you were interested in. But it's a waste of time to spend the money and put in a bunch of things that you don't know about and expect them to just pop up and be what you want. And everybody that moves to Florida finds that out. If you're from the north, when you move here, you will buy a lot of things that they're beautiful plants, but they don't necessarily belong in your yard. And believe me, I made that mistake a lot. That's why I'm a master gardener. I took the training in desperation, and boy, am I glad I did, because there are so many things out there that people are selling that they shouldn't, or at least they shouldn't sell them without a caveat, and you won't get that. So investigate the plants. Just because it's native doesn't necessarily mean it's what you want, and just because it's not native doesn't mean you shouldn't use it. So if you keep those three things in mind when you start your landscape, you'll be money ahead, and everybody will be a lot happier, and maybe your homeowners association won't sue you.
I think it's important to remember too that non-native and invasive are two very different things. You most invasive plants, you really can't buy them if they're listed. They're not for sale anywhere. So don't be scared of the word that non-native. It's not a dirty word. You can use those plants, and if you use them responsibly, you're not going to have any issues.
And a lot of the plants will have a version that's an invasive problem and a version that's fine. And Mexican petunias are one of those. Some of the I can't think of the native plants for monarch butterflies.
Milkweeds.
Milkweeds. There, thank you. There's a lot of those milkweeds that look the same that are definitely not. Some are great, some are not. And there again, if you go out and you spend the money and you buy a plant and you buy the wrong plant, you may not know it for a long period of time. A year later you find out. But when you find out, then it's too late to do anything about it.
So let's see if we have any other kind of questions here. Cindy's in Pinellas County, 4.5 miles from the Gulf and 4.5 miles from the Bay. So it probably got a little scary there for a little bit the other day, but
yeah.
Alicia's going with less grass, and she's growing succulents. I know that's like an entire hobby. I mean, there's so many different succulents you can collect and grow, and a lot of them do very well here. Some of them can get pretty invasive. The mother of 1,000s, that's the common name for it, might not be such a good choice. They drop seeds and little plant parts, and they could spread all over the place. And combining proper plants with rocks and other components, art in the garden, that always works very, very well. Okay, guys, if you have any other questions, please feel free to go ahead and share them and ask them, and we'll do our very best to answer them. we're going to work towards wrapping it up in the not too very distant future here. Anne Marie is watching today. She said it got very scary with the surge and high tide. She got very lucky. Many homes flooded. What part? I know, Anne Marie. I think you're in either in North Florida or Georgia. I think in Georgia. I didn't think it was coastal Georgia. Yeah, they had a lot of water up there. So I know. Oh, ooh, salt water.
Mm.
Wah wah wah. Palm Harbor. Ooh.
You know, that's one of those things you're not going to know for a year. If the plant looks great in a year, it didn't. But if the plant deteriorates and really looks bad in a year, then, you know, it's really sad. There is no way. It's like if you catch a real slow acting disease, will that affect you? Well, it won't affect you for a long time, but eventually it will. And if you don't catch the disease, then it won't bother you at all. And that's the way the salt water is going to act. Some plants really will die within a week. They'll start turning yellow and they look really bad. But for the most part, the things are going to die off slowly, and you're not going to know for a long time.
Okay. Anne Marie lives up in Madison County, which is basically Georgia. Anne Marie and probably a half a dozen of other people live in Madison County. It's very rural up there. And her sister lives in Palm Harbor. And yeah, she would have seen some salt water. So what? And you know, some plants may react by all the leaves turning yellow and then brown, and then all the leaves fall off. But you can give it a little bit more time after that to see if it recovers and flushes back out. If after a bit it doesn't, you can kind of get an idea eventually that it's just not coming back. And unfortunately, a lot of plants won't come back from a big dose of salt water when they're not adapted or can't deal well with it.
If we get a lot of rain, that actually helps because it tends to flush the salt out. But if you don't get much rain, a very light occasional rain actually makes the situation worse because it keeps liquefying the salt, making salt solution and attacking your plant. So the big rains are really beneficial after this.
Bernie, here's a question for you. Is there anyone that we can contact who'll come by and give advice, or that we could bring photos of our property? I'm in Hernando County.
Well, they can sure bring the photos into the extension office, and we'll be glad to go over the whole thing. We're not really in a position to go out and do things in the field. That's not really our position. We're pretty well limited in that. Master gardeners aren't supposed to do that, and there's only one extension agent, and if Bill was doing that, he would be running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we pretty well handle those things in-house. But if you want to bring photos and maybe some plant material in, we'll be glad to take care of you, spend whatever time's necessary, and go over whatever you'd like.
And the best day to do that is Thursday, because that's when Bernie is here with us. If you'd like to call first, there is our phone number. And if you just have pictures you want to email, there's my email. I don't have the Master Gardener email on here. I'm going to have to fix that. I have Colby's email, though. So if you'd like to email Colby with any questions about Florida-friendly landscaping, or if you'd like to email him with any suggestions of classes you'd like to see or topics that you'd like to see him cover, I'm sure he'd appreciate that, because I know with myself, after a while, it's like, I can't think up anything to do a class on. I've run out of ideas.
Well, Lily has had a lot of stuff covered already, so it's trying to look for gaps to fill in, which there are not very many.
Yeah, you don't want to do the same thing over and over and over again.
Mhm.
You want to do something new, fresh. We think outside the box. We think of some different things. We may have one day right here on the virtual plant clinic. I know the topic of iguanas has come up in the past. We may be doing something on that where we have an expert in here and we have somebody grilling up grilled iguana out back. So that's something for everybody to look forward to. We really like to think way outside the box sometimes. Because I know that we do have some followers who live in South Florida who actually have to deal with iguanas running around the yard, eating their plants. I don't know how you grow a vegetable garden down there. The iguanas just gobble it right up. We have a husky. I don't know what he would do with an iguana. He'd pick it up, but I'm not really sure what he would do with it after that. So hopefully I won't ever have to find out either. Got just a couple other questions here. Anne-Marie asks, who do you connect with for olive trees? I have been meaning to ask. If you live in North Florida, they do grow olive trees up there, but you have to grow the right varieties because apparently in the world, there's like a million different varieties of olives and they grow in different areas. There are some, and they're doing a lot of research on that. Send me an email sometime, and I know that we have a researcher working on that. I'll go ahead and send you her name and email. Or if you look online, just Google UF dash or space olive trees, olive tree varieties, growing olives, whatever it might be. They've done and published a lot of research on that with the different varieties that do well in different parts of Florida. North Florida, you have more choices than we do here in South Florida because most olives aren't particularly tropical. Although, Bernie, I had to go to Silverthorne about a year ago and look at somebody's palm tree. I'm standing there and I look next to me and they have a beautiful tree and it was an olive tree. Beautiful kind of silver green foliage and it had olives on it. They said it's the first time it's flowered and gotten olives. Look beautiful, doing fine. So you can do it. Just have to know. Oh my gosh. Okay, Anne-Marie's she's a pro. She's got 500 olives. So you are the pro. You're the expert. You're the one we should be sending people to for advice on that. And she has some that are 10 years old and she's gotten olive oil from. That's great. You have more choices up there, up in North Florida, up in the Panhandle, than we have here with different varieties. But you have so many. Shoot me an email, and I'll set you up with the UF researchers who are working on that. They can send you more specific advice.
We have several clients that have got olives in the county here, but I don't know of any of them that have actually done anything with olive fruit. The most varieties tend to prefer a Mediterranean climate, which is nice warm temperatures but very low humidity. And
that ain't here.
I see them because they've got problems from the humidity and they're showing fungal problems.
That's what usually happens is because of the high humidity here, it's hot during the day, warm at night for months on end. That's what does in a lot of those northern plants. And they tend to have a lot more fungal diseases here. Okay, let's see what else we got here real quick. It's a question about crown of thorns. I know people grow them. They can do well here. They get oleander caterpillars. I believe crown of thorns is one of the other hosts for them. So watch out for caterpillars. And I think crown of thorns might be the type of plant where you don't want to overwater it. And it can be difficult if you have it growing in a pot out in your backyard where it gets rained on. If we have a rainy summer and it's raining every day, every other day, it may be getting too much water. So keep an eye on the water. Watch out for caterpillars. But yeah, Bernie, you ever get any crown of thorns questions?
No, I haven't. I did grow one, but I only kept it going for about maybe 3 or 4 years.
And Cindy asked, did anybody see anything about the 100-year-old oak that split at the governor's mansion? I didn't see anything about that, but I know that it came close enough to Tallahassee to damage trees and blow down trees. Nothing like poor Perry, Florida, and Keaton Beach, where it made landfall. There's some YouTube videos that somebody shot, like when it was making landfall and when the eye was going right over. And I'm so glad that did not happen here.
There was a live stream. The camera, I think, ran until just shy of 6 a.m. At Cedar Key, pointed off of Dock Street, which is out into the bay. And you could just see, at 2 or 3 a.m., the crazy amount of, like, the storm surge coming in. The waves are just beating the dock there and those restaurants and stuff. So I'm sure that up even further north, it was really, really rough.
Yeah, well, around Perry, and then even closer to the coast, they said you couldn't even see the street, because that's when I knew the other day that we hadn't gotten it too bad overnight. I look outside, I didn't see any leaves on the ground that had been ripped off the trees.
Mm-hmm.
Up there, it ripped off leaves, it ripped off little branches, bigger branches, and the ground was just like a couple inches deep in nothing but green leaves. So it looked like the road turned into basically a green path.
Mm.
So everybody be careful out there. Hopefully everybody survived with, very little or no or minimal damage. Remember, if you got flooded, or especially if you got saltwater flooding or saltwater intrusion, you're going to have to keep an eye on that lawn, the plants. Not a whole lot you could do, but especially keep a close eye on those trees, because you don't want them to become damaged, unhealthy, and then fall when you don't expect it. It's always best to have them taken down before they fall, unless it's way out in the pasture, in which case leave it for the woodpeckers and the animals until it just falls over in the woods. That's just fine. If it's next to your house, call an arborist to come out there and evaluate it and look at it to make sure everything is okie dokie and you're not going to have a problem. Let's see one last time. Let's go ahead and throw my email back up there. Anybody has any questions, feel free to send me an email. If it's on a Thursday and I'm busy, I'm just going to forward it to Bernie. Eventually, we'll get Colby up to speed where I can send the FFL ones to him, and he'll send the more difficult disease-related ones to me. And we'll take your email, and it may make a couple circles around the squares here, but we'll figure out what the problem is and get an answer back to you. So a lot of times, thank you so much for being patient when you email me. Things get hectic sometimes, and it takes me a few days to actually go through my inbox and get all of them answered properly and find links and everything else. So thank you for your patience. We definitely appreciate it. Anything else, guys?
Nope, I don't got anything.
No, not really.
I'm going to be here again next week. Bernie?
I should be.
Okay.
I will.
So there'll be somebody here next week. Exactly who, we're not positive yet, but we will be here again next week. So if y'all have any questions, if you ever want to send me pictures beforehand or during the plant clinic, I can screen share them and show the plant and tree pictures to everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for all the questions. You guys are great. If you didn't join us every week, we probably would have gotten bored and given up on this a long time ago. So thanks for keeping us busy Thursday mornings. And until next week, everybody stay safe. We'll see you then. Bye, guys.